Front and Center. Front and Center. A focus on important and significant developments affecting the lives of Filipinos, not only in the Philippines, but also those living and working around the world. Join us in Front and Center. Front and Center. Here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service.
Welcome to the year-end special of Front and Center on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. I'm Jerome Toledo, and in this edition, we will take you back to the most pressing issues of 2024 with some of our guests in the program throughout the year. And you can listen and watch this episode on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. That's Radyo Pilipinas World Service. And you are listening in this edition on the following shortwave frequencies. That's 9.475 MHz, 15.640 MHz, and 17.820 MHz. Join me in this special edition of Front and Center 2024 Year-End Report. Your program has covered a wide range of issues that affects the Filipino people, be it in the country or abroad. And we begin on the Philippines-China row as territorial disputes became deeper and more complex than ever. Our troops in the Western Front are still facing challenges from the fellow Asian neighbor up north, notoriously through a series of deliberate ramming of Chinese maritime ships to ours. And besides Manila and Beijing row, there is also an issue that affects us directly, the Taipei-Beijing row, which continues up to this day. And as we know, China still does not recognize Taiwan's independence and condemns every move that favors the island state. China believes that Taiwan is an integral part of Chinese national territory and needs to be taken back into China's patrimony. It is worth to consider that we have more than 100,000 Filipino workers in Taiwan, somehow affecting them in return. So let's take a listen again to the analysis of geopolitical expert Professor Renato De Castro of De La Salle International Studies regarding the Philippines-China row, as well as One China policy as he talked to Mr. Ray Sampang last January.
On this issue of front and center, we're going to tackle about this statement of China regarding President Marcos Jr.'s expression of, let's say, congratulatory message to the newly elected president of Taiwan. Did President Marcos in any way violate the One China policy as alleged by China?
No way. Because, the message was conveyed through the social media. If that message had been conveyed through a diplomatic channel, let's say from the Department of Foreign Affairs, or let's say hypothetically, of course, we don't have an embassy in Taipei, well, that would be a clear violation. But the message was conveyed through the social media, and it's simply congratulating the fact that you have a president. He did not mention anything about Taiwan being a state. Simply telling him that it's great that you won this election, and that's it. And of course, he emphasized the common interests of both the Filipino and Taiwanese people. There's no mention of the fact that there's such thing as a Taiwanese government or a Taiwanese state. Although, of course, in reality, despite the allegation of China based on its one China principle, Taiwan is a self-governing island. It's not in any way governed from Beijing.
So what is the basis of this, let's say, complaint of China that the President Marcos Jr. of the Philippines violated the One China policy? In the first place, can you give us an overview or a context of what does the One China policy really composed of?
Okay, let's talk about, let's say, what the Chinese would call the Shanghai Communique, or sometimes we talk in terms of the One China principle from the Chinese position. There are basically three elements that we have to understand. Number one, of course, that once, of course, you would like to establish a diplomatic relations with the People's Republic of China, you have to, basically take into account three very important elements. Number one, you considered the People's Republic of China, or sometimes called mainland China, as the legitimate China. So
Okay.
you have to basically remove, if you have any embassy in Taiwan or Taipei, you have to remove it. So you won't send any diplomats to Taipei, you would send them to Beijing. And all interaction would be, of course, Filipino diplomats interacting with their Chinese counterparts in Beijing. That's the first element. The second element, of course, is you consider Taiwan as a Chinese territory, or sometimes the Chinese would say a province of China. And the third element, of course, that the One China policy allows people-to-people relations. So you can have business dealings, you have consular relationship, you have, of course, even cultural activities going on. So this is allowed in the notion of the One China policy. Okay, let's look at. So this is the One China policy, but what you have in the real world are several One China policies. So you
Okay.
have to separate. From a Chinese perspective, it's the One China principle, but in the real world, you have cases of almost 206 One China policies. For
Okay.
example, the United States, Canada, Japan, and a number of European countries accept the fact that China, of course, the People's Republic of China, is the official China, but they reject the second part.
Okay.
The United States, Japan do not accept the fact that Taiwan is a province of China. We
Okay.
could talk about the nuance regarding this matter in another setting. And of course, you have increasing people-to-people relation. So that's the case right now. This is what China would like, a One China principle. But in the real world, countries basically have their own respective One China policies, not simply based on what the Chinese are telling them, and the principle. It's primarily based on their national interest. And of course, who defines the national interest is, of course, a sovereign country. So in the case, looking at the context of President Marcos' message, he emphasized the fact that the Filipino and the Taiwanese people share common interests. Number one, of course, is the fact that we have 200,000 Filipino OFWs working in Taiwan. We have a very dynamic economic relations with Taiwan, trade, tourism, so forth and so on. And number three, of course, is the fact that both Taiwan and the Philippines are liberal democracies.
All right.
Both countries value, of course, the fact that they have a democratic system and the fact that every a certain period they would conduct a free, credible, and honest election. And President Marcos' congratulatory message to Vice President Lai is within this context. You have one democracy congratulating another democracy, and it's not has something to do with the fact that you have a Philippine government congratulating Taiwanese government, because we don't recognize any Taiwanese government.
Well, you said that there are different perceptions, or let's say
Policies.
policies,
Yeah, policies.
on the One China policy. So China on this issue would like to ram their own version of One China policy.
Yeah, very
or-
restrictive,
yes.
very rigid One China principle, which basically challenges the third element, that you could have people-to-people relation.
Yes. And besides, the Philippines has a MECO, Economic Cultural
Yes.
Office in Taiwan.
And they have here in Manila, in Makati specifically, they have the Taiwan Economic Cooperation Organization.
Yes.
So those are, of course, they're non-governmental entities, and they operate on the basis of the fact that both Taipei and Manila accept the fact that they have a very dynamic people-to-people relations.
And
That
in the-
is, of course, again, allowed by even China's One China principle.
All right. And in the first place, if China is going to be rigid on this One China policy, strict, why did they allow thousands of Filipino workers working in Taiwan right now? They would be asking visas under the Taiwan government.
No way. People's Republic China, no way can they do anything about it. They got their visas from, of course, the self-governing
Yes.
institution in Taipei. Practically, of course, this is again a position I would like to state from a former president's side. There's no need for Taiwan to become independent, because in de facto manner, Taiwan is an independent government. Of course, that is rejected by, especially in the case of our adoption of our own very specific One China policy. We accept the second formula, that Taiwan is only a province of China.
And with the result of this latest election in Taiwan, the democratic system of government is still in place. Majority of Taiwanese people voted for Te. we all know that he's a pro democracy. What is the reflection of the voting behavior in Taiwan right now?
If we just focus, of course, on the presidential, there's of course another dynamics that happen in the legislative. Again, looking at what happened in the past few weeks, China, of course, actively conducted actions that are aimed to intimidate the Taiwanese population.
Mm-hmm.
China actively supported, of course, the Kuomintang, which is, of course, friendly and close to Beijing, and of course has ostracized, has criticized the Democratic Progressive Party, especially Vice President Lai, and of course his vice presidential candidate, who used to be, of course, the Taiwan's representative in Washington D.C. as secessionist, separatist, and of course China was very much active in the domestic politics of Taiwan. But by the fact that the majority of the Taiwanese people voted for the candidate of the Democratic Progressive Party indicates the fact that the Taiwanese people, the Taiwanese nation, are of course more than willing to
Mm-hmm.
defy China, to challenge
Mm-hmm.
China's agenda, to have, of course, a government in Taiwan that is, of course, friendly to Beijing. And of course, again, there's something to do with what's happening. And in a way, also reflects the fact that, the Taiwanese people wants, of course, to determine their own future.
Mm-hmm.
This is simply a case of what we call the right of the Taiwanese people for self-determination, which of course is rejected by China.
Can we safely say that the Taiwanese people would prefer to be identified as Taiwanese, not as
I
Chinese?
think, yeah, I think that's the result of the separation between Taiwan and, of course, China, since, of course, you have the retreat of the Kuomintang forces from mainland China.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just give you a story about, when Mao Zedong was about to die.
Mm-hmm.
Mao Zedong was asked, the Chairman Mao Zedong was asked, what are two things in life that you have regretted?
Mm-hmm.
And Mao Zedong said, two. Number one,
Mm-hmm.
we declared a People's Republic of China, whereas, of course, the Republic of China went to Taiwan.
Mm-hmm.
And number two, of course, is the fact that the Communist Party, the People's Republic of China, invented their own character, what they
Oh.
call the simplified version pinyin.
Mm-hmm.
In contrast, of course, to the writing that is still practiced in Taiwan, the classical. And according to Mao Zedong, we have basically planted the seeds of separation.
Oh, it's in their own doing.
Yeah, it's own doing. Mao Zedong at his deathbed basically admitted it's their own doing of the Communist Party and, of course, the People's Republic of China. And of course, just looking at the action of China under President Xi Jinping, the fact that you're coercing, intimidating, threatening, how do you think? And of course, what China has been doing to the people of Hong Kong.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all the actions are primarily directed in encouraging the Taiwanese to develop their own sense of national identities, distinct from mainland China. And of course, always the rhetoric of China. You have no right history with it. Those are things that, of course, intimidate, basically mobilize a liberal democratic society like Taiwan to basically value their right of national self-determination. And of course, to relish and cherish their system of liberal democracy, which is, of course, totally different from the communist system of mainland China.
And now, for our overseas Filipino workers, the Philippine government is committed to protect the rights and dignity of our fellow kababayans abroad. In distressing times of a Filipino worker overseas, the government is ready to extend assistance and save a Filipino from harm. So now, take a listen to the interview of the program with yours truly, with DMW or Department of Migrant Workers Secretary Hans Leo Kakdak as he assumed the position last May, and I asked what are his priorities and plans for the department. On the Labor Day speech of President Marcos Jr. on May 1st, he tasked the Department of Migrant Workers to mobilize the action fund amounting to 2.8 billion Philippine peso. If we can recall, Secretary Kakdak, this action fund was previously known as Assistance to National and was previously managed by the Department of Foreign Affairs, focusing exclusively on the unique challenges faced by the migrant workers. So for this one, Secretary Kakdak, how will you be managing this fund for the benefit of OFWs? Will this suffice? given that?
Yes. Let me just clarify that this is separate and distinct from the DFA Assistance to Nationals Fund, which continues to be funded under the General Appropriations Act, and this action fund is a special fund set up in the charter of the Department of Migrant Workers, the legislative charter, that creates a fund for OFWs in distress who need legal, financial, humanitarian, and medical and other forms of assistance. So this is a fund that we can utilize in a variety of ways, and of course, as we know, we've had some cases also turned over to us by the DFA, and we're handling currently with respect to jurisdictions where there is a migrant workers office. We're handling the legal cases, meaning cases filed by OFWs against their employers for contract violation and violation of labor rights, as well as cases that can be filed against OFWs, for instance, criminal cases where they need the legal services of a defense lawyer. So this is the one important component of the Action Fund. And of course, during Labor Day yesterday, we were directed by the President to ensure that we utilize this fund. We're thankful to the President and to the Congress for providing us 2.8 billion for 2024, and we will indeed utilize this fund for assistance. And the President also mentioned during global emergencies there will be OFWs who need to benefit from this fund, and we shall do this as well in terms of repatriation services, and also in terms of helping out OFWs in distress through, as I mentioned, medical assistance.
Okay, it's not just about legal. The Action Fund it does not only cover legal terms or assistance, to be exact, but also it covers assistance to our OFWs who are stricken by natural calamities and so on and so forth. Is that correct, Secretary Kakdak?
Yes, that's right. It's a fund that can be utilized in a variety of ways. It can be utilized for those who had just returned, for instance, returnees from Sudan last year, and Israel also, in light of the current situation there, have benefited from this fund. Also, OFWs who have a medical condition, whether here or abroad, upon coming home, might need some medical help or funds, for instance, for their medicine or treatment. So we can also fund such expenses under the Action Fund.
All right. And for this year's fund of the Action Fund, which is 2.8 billion Philippine peso, will this suffice given that this is a marching order of President Marcos Jr.?
Yes, of course. It will be enough in my view, but of course we can always request for a supplemental fund, but the 2.8 billion in itself, I think, will already cover a host of cases involving distressed OFWs and cover many beneficiaries.
All right, and that's good to hear that all of the cases of OFWs that will be in trouble will cover on that Action Fund.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
All right. Okay, moving on, Secretary Kakdak. On your first flag ceremony as newly appointed DMW Secretary, you mentioned that you will continue the programs of the late Secretary Susan Toots Ople in the department. My question is, what programs of the former Secretary would you like to continue now that you are leading the department?
Well, policies and programs, no? And one main policy thrust under Secretary Ople's time was the matter on the DMW being the tahanan or home of OFWs, tahanan ng OFWs, where they could find solace, where they could find sanctuary from harm and from a situation where their rights have been violated, and where they feel that they can put forward their grievances, and also any issues or any suggestions or proposals by way of policy improvements or program development that they could put forward. Also, with respect to reintegration, which is also a presidential mandate, as stated by the president yesterday,
Yes.
that we can also provide reintegration services for returning OFWs. And also, Secretary Toots emphasized the rights-based approach, which is part of our protective mantle, which means we will be mindful of the human and employment rights, labor rights of OFWs, and how we will safeguard those rights. And also, Secretary Toots developed the concept or the policy thrust of OFWs as co-architects of national development, meaning the continuing participation of OFWs and their families in our economy. They are part of our nation building process, our nation building experience. They are, should I say, part of our economic engine or elements of growth. And in this regard, we will empower them with financial education in terms of knowledge on how to save, plan, and invest, so they could use their hardly earned income wisely, and also point them in the direction of skills upgrading if they seek further employment, or facilitation of employment itself, and or training with respect to livelihood and entrepreneurship if they wish to set up businesses. So we, of course, having said all that, we will partner with the relevant government agencies such as the DTI, Department of Agriculture, TESDA, DOLE, and the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas for financial education. Also, to veer them away from investment scams, we have partnered with the Securities and Exchange Commission under their ASTIG program, where they are carrying out implementation of anti-investment investment scam laws and regulations, so that OFWs do not become victimized by investment scams.
On the economic concerns, the Philippines showed its aggressive economic growth this past 12 months. One of them is the continuous business pledges the country receives from international business community resulting from President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s trips abroad. In addition, investors showed confidence on our economy thanks to the persistent encouragement of the chief executive to global business community to consider investing in the country. The economy continues to rise consistently despite challenges and circumstances, all thanks to the hard work of the Philippine economic managers. Now, let's take a listen as we feature again the interview of the program with the RCBC Chief Economist Michael Ricafort on the economy.
Actually, our economic growth is among the fastest in the region, meaning in ASEAN or in Asia. So, well, we saw already some faster government spending because well, of course, it's recovering from a year ago. Because a year ago, it was the anniversary of the presidential elections, coming from of course, the base was higher during the presidential elections, and there were some pockets of government underspending earlier last year, and now we've seen that recovering, picking up the increase in government spending that has helped in the faster economic growth. So goes also, as mentioned, in the industry sector, some pickup especially in construction. That's also reflective of the increased government spending that positively affected the construction. And well, the thing the other sectors that slowed down, well, the major ones include consumer spending, which accounts for at least 70% of the economy. So that's very important to stimulate, enable to have much faster economic growth. But this is understandable. The slower growth in consumer spending, uh, largely brought about by higher prices or inflation in at least for more than 2 years already. So it's understandable if prices have gone up for the past 2.5 years. So the ability to spend by consumers have been kind of reduced and impaired, so to speak, because of higher prices that lessened or reduced their purchases, enable to pay for the higher prices of goods and services. So that's why it's also very important going forward to have inflation that's slower and within the target of the central bank at the 2 to 4% target. Well, we have seen inflation, the latest data that picked up to 4.4% in July, but that was largely brought about by uh, the effects of the Typhoon Karina. We've seen some
Mm.
pickup. Well, we have to expect that, no. It Typhoon Karina happened July 23 to 25, and the massive flooding and related storm damage is similar to Typhoon Ulysses in November of 2020. That's nearly 4 years ago during the pandemic time, and
Mhm.
also similar to the damage brought about by on Typhoon Ondoy nearly 15 years ago. That was September of 2009. And during those times, whenever there are large flood and storm damage, especially in here in the capital, in Metro Manila, and in nearby localities, provinces, and regions, there's some really pickup in inflation by about zero point 0.5 to 1 percentage point.
Mhm.
So, yeah, but hopefully this will be temporary because in the coming months, we would see also as an upsetting positive factor. Well, the rice tariff on the rather the tariff on imported rice, which was effectively reduced to 15% from 30%. That's effective July 7 last month. So, and we have yet to see the arrival of more imported rice with lower prices. It's equivalent to a 20% discount. And because of the lower import taxes from 30 down to 15%. So, uh, and the world price of rice has gone down to 2 year lows since last month, coming from 15-year highs that has been ongoing for many months between August of last year till around June. So, so it would mean lower prices of imported rice because of the reduced import taxes or import rate, the tariff rate, and at the same time lower world price of rice. That
Mhm.
would help bring down the prices of local rice, including the locally produced ones, and because of better weather conditions also that's attributed to the lower world price, because many other countries also experience drought, heat wave since late last year till early this year, and El Nino already officially ended here in the Philippines since June. So it would mean slower inflation going forward that would counteract the impact of uh, Typhoon Karina, because uh, rice accounts for nearly 9% of the inflation basket. So if you have lower prices of rice, it's going to slow down inflation. And the fact that most of the inflation that we have seen in recent months largely attributed to higher rice prices.
All right.
Rice prices,
Mhm.
yeah, well, locally, at least 20% year on year.
All
So
right,
it would
Mike.
really have a positive impact
All
eventually.
right. Since we're talking about weather related events like typhoon seasons and some, particularly and also El Nino and La Nina season. So would these weather phenomena may affect our economic growth?
Well, yeah, realistically, even early this year, had it not been for El Nino, the drought, yeah, that's another. Well, on top of the what I mentioned a while ago, the growth slowdown in consumer spending, we also saw a drag, a negative year-on-year growth, at least 3% in the agricultural sector. So that's largely attributed to the El Nino drought. Because reduced rainfall, the heat wave earlier this year, since fourth quarter of last year, that led to reduced output and production by the agricultural sector. Hence, we have seen that year-on-year contraction. And it's also, even a year ago, it was already contracting, though by a lesser extent. So that was a drag. Had it not been for that, economic growth would have been much faster. And had it not been for higher inflation, economic growth would have easily reached near 7%, if not even beyond 7%. And considering that now we're already among the fastest growing economies at 6.3% here in ASEAN. And that's why it's also very important to prepare now for La Nina because, that's the foretaste of it. It was already started by Typhoon Karina. So that's the really the extreme case that could happen. But it just this one is considering it's just the start of the typhoon season, the just we just got the onset of the rainy season since around June to July. So those are the risks going forward to prepare for those kinds of weather disruptions in terms of increased rainfall brought about by La Nina later this year. So preparations, meaning to say, just like the similar to the preparations for El Nino a few months before that. Stockpiling, of course, preemptive. If there's a need, of course, it's still the priority to boost local production,
Mm-hmm.
but and to be augmented eventually by imports if necessary. We have non-monetary measures, as we call them, because we have seen reduced import tariffs also, not just on
Mm-hmm.
rice, but on corn, on pork and meat products, and coal. Well, it's really meant to. Well, those non-monetary measures have been ongoing since the pandemic time, and to augment the local supplies. We all know that this was prompted a few years ago by the African swine fever that reduced the pork output in the country. So
Mm-hmm.
the stopgap measure, is importation if needed. Same goes with the other agricultural products like rice, corn, sugar.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really meant to, to ensure that the inventories locally are well stocked to prepare for
Okay.
those weather disturbances. And of course, the penultimate objective is to keep inflation low. Of course, if supplies are sufficient locally, so prices would be tempered, and
Mm-hmm.
it would help reduce prices and counteract any upside pressure on prices at the very least. So, yeah, those are part of the non-monetary measures
Okay.
to better control and manage inflation going forward. And
Okay.
definitely, yeah, those are the
Mm-hmm.
challenges. Of course, there may still be intervention measures. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
our objective for our whole economy is to make it more inclusive, to make it more sustainable, and in the sense that there would be more sectors that would benefit from the positive economic numbers, like agriculture employs at least 20% of the total workforce. So it's really a matter of if interventions maybe still be needed, especially the use of technology to boost output
Mm-hmm.
and to increase production, such as, of course, increased mechanization and automation of the processes, and higher yielding seeds, more resilient varieties to further boost output. And at the same time, of course, better irrigation facilities, the infrastructures like farm to market roads, the storage facilities, and so on. The objective, of course, is to further increase the productivity, increase output, and at reduce production costs that would eventually lead to lower prices of these agricultural commodities, and lessen the reliance on importation. So those are the fundamental things, and it would increase the incomes of those belonging in the agricultural sectors.
We hope you enjoyed our 2024 year-end report here on Front and Center. Many thanks to the staff of Radio Pilipinas World Service, led by Mr. Erwin Peñano and Milo Janela, for assisting us in producing the program throughout the year. And yours truly would like to thank our station manager, the original host of the program, Mr. Ray Sampang. Until next time here on Front and Center on Radio Pilipinas World Service. This is Jerome Toledo. Mabuhay and love the Philippines.
You have just heard and watched Front and Center. Front and Center. Join us again for another edition here on Radyo Pilipinas World Service. Front and Center.